At first, nothing seemed unusual. Everything looked normal. Ordinary people, ordinary surroundings, familiar sounds, familiar routines. The kind of moment that doesn't announce itself. The kind of moment you would never think to remember. But something was there. Something subtle. A detail that didn't belong. A pause that felt slightly longer than it should have. A look that lingered. A shift in tone that didn't match the words being spoken. It wasn't obvious enough to alarm anyone. It wasn't dramatic enough to demand attention. It was quiet, and because it was quiet, it was easy to ignore. People noticed, though more people than you might think. Each of them registered the same uneasy feeling in their own way. A thought that flickered briefly and then faded. A question that almost formed, but never reached the surface. And still, no one said anything. Not because they didn't care. Not because they didn't see it. But because silence felt easier than uncertainty. Later, everyone would ask the same question. The one that always comes too late. The one that echoes after consequences are already set in motion. Why didn't anyone speak up when they had the chance? This is not a story about what happened. It's a story about why the human mind chooses silence, even when it knows better. Silence rarely begins with fear. It begins with normalcy, a place that feels safe, a situation that feels familiar. The brain scans the environment and finds no immediate threat, and when there is no obvious danger, the mind relaxes. It fills in the gaps with assumptions. Everything is probably fine. People have been here before. Nothing bad has happened yet. That word, yet, is powerful. It gives the mind permission to delay action. It allows discomfort to coexist with inaction. Someone notices something small. A rule being bent, a boundary being crossed, just slightly. Not enough to justify confrontation, not enough to risk embarrassment. So the mind does what it is trained to do. It rationalizes. It smooths over the rough edge. It reframes concern as imagination. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm misreading it. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation I don't know about. These thoughts are not lies. They are protective instincts. The brain is designed to conserve energy and avoid social conflict. Speaking up costs something. It costs attention. It costs comfort. It risks rejection. Silence, on the other hand, costs nothing in the moment. Silence allows the individual to blend back into the group. To remain unseen, to remain safe. And so, the moment passes. Not because it wasn't important, but because importance is rarely obvious while it is happening. What makes this even more unsettling is that silence is rarely a solo act. It is collective. While one person is convincing themselves it's not their place to speak, another is doing the same thing. Each individual assumes someone else will act, someone more qualified, someone with authority, someone more confident, someone louder. Responsibility dissolves when it is shared. It becomes abstract. Everyone feels it, but no one owns it. This creates a strange illusion. It feels like a decision has been made, even though no one actually decided anything. Silence begins to feel like agreement, even when it isn't. And once silence becomes the norm, breaking it feels disruptive. It feels like going against the group, even though the group never actually chose this path. There is always a moment when the mind hesitates, a fraction of a second where instinct and logic collide. The heart speeds up slightly. The body becomes aware. This is the point where action is still possible, where one sentence could change the direction of everything that follows. But that moment doesn't feel heroic. It feels awkward. It feels risky. The mind starts negotiating. What if I'm wrong? What if I embarrass myself? What if people think I'm overreacting? What if I cause unnecessary trouble? These questions don't require answers. Their purpose is to delay action just long enough for the moment to pass. And once it does, the opportunity is gone. Time moves forward. Events continue. And the silence remains intact. What people don't realize is that silence has momentum. The longer it exists, the heavier it becomes. The harder it is to break. Each passing moment reinforces the idea that staying quiet was the correct choice. After all, nothing bad happened immediately. This creates a false sense of validation. The brain interprets the absence of immediate consequences as proof that silence was justified. But cause and effect are rarely immediate. The cost of silence is often delayed, hidden beneath layers of time and distance. When the outcome finally arrives, it feels sudden, even though it was forming quietly all along. Psychology has names for these patterns, but the experience itself is deeply human. Humans are social creatures. Survival has always depended on belonging to the group. Standing out has historically meant danger, exile, vulnerability. This instinct still lives inside the modern brain, even when the threat is no longer physical. Social discomfort activates the same systems as physical pain. Being judged, being rejected, being wrong in front of others. These experiences feel threatening on a biological level, so the brain avoids them. It chooses the path of least resistance. Silence becomes a form of self-preservation. But what feels safe in the moment can become damaging over time, because silence doesn't stop events from unfolding. It only removes the chance to influence them. After everything changes, the clarity arrives. In hindsight, the signs feel obvious. The red flags seem impossible to miss. People replay the moments in their minds, noticing details they ignored before. The door that was left open, the comment that felt wrong, the behavior that didn't match the situation. Now the mind connects the dots effortlessly. Now the words, come easily. I knew something was wrong. I felt it. I should have said something, but chitav is a powerless phrase. It changes nothing, and this is where guilt enters. Not loud guilt, quiet guilt. The kind that settles in slowly. The realization that silence was not neutral, that choosing not to act was still a choice. The human mind struggles with this truth because it challenges a comforting belief. The belief that harm only comes from action. In reality, harm often comes from inaction, from hesitation, from waiting for certainty that never arrives. Courage is often misunderstood. People imagine courage as bold, decisive, loud, but real courage is usually subtle. It often appears as discomfort, as speaking when the voice shakes, as asking a question that interrupts the flow of things, as risking misunderstanding to prevent something worse. Most people do not lack awareness. They lack permission. Permission to trust their instincts. Permission to disrupt silence. Permission to be the first voice in a quiet room. The mind looks for external validation before acting. It waits for others to confirm the concern. But when everyone is waiting, nothing happens. This is how silence protects itself. It convinces each individual that they are alone in their doubt, even when they are not. Silence isolates people internally while presenting a calm exterior. It creates the illusion of consensus. Over time, this pattern repeats. In workplaces, in families, in communities, in everyday interactions, small issues go unaddressed. Minor concerns are postponed. Boundaries erode slowly. Each time silence is chosen, it becomes easier to choose again. The threshold for speaking rises. What once felt concerning begins to feel normal, not because it is acceptable, but because it is familiar. Familiarity is powerful. It dulls sensitivity. It reshapes expectations. Eventually, people forget there was ever a moment when speaking felt possible. They adjust, they adapt, they rationalize, until something breaks. And when it does, the question returns. Why didn't anyone stop this earlier? Why didn't anyone say something? The answer is rarely simple. It is légère, built from fear, social pressure, uncertainty, and habit. No single moment caused the outcome. It was the accumulation of quiet decisions. The repeated choice to remain silent. Silence is often defended as politeness, as patience, as minding one's own business, but there is a difference between restraint and avoidance, between thoughtfulness and fear. Silence becomes dangerous when it is used to escape responsibility, when it replaces honesty, when it allows harm to grow unchecked. The mind prefers clean narratives, clear villains, clear mistakes. But reality is messier. Most harm is not caused by malicious intent. It is caused by hesitation, by diffusion of responsibility, by the hope that things will resolve themselves. The truth is uncomfortable. Many outcomes could be altered by small interventions at the right moment. A question, a warning, a refusal to ignore what feels wrong. These actions rarely feel dramatic in the moment. They feel inconvenient. They feel socially risky, but their absence shapes the future. The quiet truth is that silence is powerful, more powerful than most people realize. It can protect, but it can also enable. It can preserve peace, but it can also preserve problems. The difference lies in awareness, in recognizing when silence is serving wisdom and when it is serving fear. This distinction is subtle, but crucial. Wisdom pauses. Fear delays. Wisdom considers consequences. Fear avoids discomfort. Learning to recognize this difference requires attention. It requires listening to the body, the unease, the tension, the internal signal that something is not aligned. These signals are often dismissed because they lack concrete evidence. But intuition is not randomness. It is pattern recognition formed through experience. Ignoring it repeatedly weakens trust in oneself. Over time, people learn to doubt their own perceptions. They outsource judgment to the group. They wait for permission that never comes. Breaking silence is not about being loud. It is about being honest. Honest with oneself first. Acknowledging discomfort instead of suppressing it. Naming concern instead of disguising it. Silence thrives in ambiguity. Clarity disrupts it. Even a simple question can shift the dynamic. Even a moment of hesitation expressed out loud can change the trajectory of events. Not every concern is correct. Not every instinct is accurate. But the cost of being wrong is often smaller than the cost of saying nothing. The mind exaggerates social risk while underestimating long-term impact. This imbalance keeps people quiet. Understanding this does not eliminate fear, but it reframes it. Fear becomes information, not instruction. The next time you find yourself in a quiet moment that feels heavy, pay attention. Notice the impulse to stay silent. Notice the reasons your mind offers. Then ask yourself a different question. What happens if no one speaks? What continues if nothing changes? Silence answers these questions eventually, but it answers them in outcomes, not words. By the time the lesson is clear, the opportunity has passed. Silence is never empty. It is filled with unspoken thoughts, deferred responsibility, and invisible choices. It shapes relationships, cultures, and futures in ways that are rarely acknowledged. Most people will never remember the moments when silence mattered. They will remember the consequences instead. The quiet truth is that speaking up is not about control. It is about participation, about refusing to be passive in moments that shape direction. It does not guarantee better outcomes, but it restores agency. Silence feels safe because it hides risk, but safety built on avoidance is fragile. Eventually, reality demands a response, and when it does, silence offers none. This is why the most important moments rarely announce themselves. They arrive quietly. They ask little. Just awareness. Just honesty. Just the courage to interrupt comfort. Not every silence is wrong, but every silence is a choice. And sometimes, it is the loudest one we make.